Good Thursday to you, everybody in Com 651. Welcome to week boom 6. How have you been doing? Everybody all right? Good. All right, let's get this week started with whoa, whoa, whoa. There we go. Much better. Now I'm here, your sufficiently caffeinated communication instructor. What do we have here by way of cups besides a scary looking grizzly bear? It is, oh yes, Black Rifle Coffee Company. Great company. I think I picked this cup up in Arizona. Prescott? No. Phoenix, maybe something like that. You know, one of those big flat area type cities. Mm. But I want to respond to a vicious rumor that I heard was going around that your sufficiently caffeinated communication instructor, often does not have any coffee in his coffee cup. Let me dispel those nasty rumors right now and see right there. A Scottsdale. That's where I think I got this. Okay. Much better. Let's take a look at this week, what you're going to be doing, and then we'll go back and look at the questions last week and see what you said and see what we can add. You take a look at the module this week. We have readings, we have the discussion, we have discussion questions, but the main thing that sticks out this week, you now have the opportunity and should take full advantage of it to begin phase 2 of your public relations case and campaign. Okay. If you look in the module down in the very bottom of the module, you'll say assignments, and that will take you to the instructions, or you could just go to the assignments tab in Canvas and you will see it there as well. Now you're free to use, in fact, you're actually encouraged / required to use any material that you can lay your hands on that is reliable. Remember, one of the emphases in this class is data, and more data. All right, avoid the garbage in, garbage out syndrome. So you can look around on the internet, in other texts, use your text as rough guidelines, if you will. All right. So in this phase, you're going to be setting the goals and objectives for your client. All right. That is, you will clearly prioritize the goals of your PR campaign. And here's the important element. You're going to match them to specific demographics that you believe will be critical to the success of the organization that you're pitching. So I think everybody's working on the library, on Billy Graham's library. So who's the audience? What are the folks that might go there who aren't going there, or who are going there and could go there more? All right. And how do you know? So you can use Hayes et al. To get started. But take a look around in the data. Try to clearly identify and prioritize. Like, we're going to aim for this group first. We're going to aim for this group second. We're going to aim for this group third. Lists of the public, that is demographic groups, audiences that you believe your public relations campaign should target. Be sure to have well-researched reasons. Who is it that goes to libraries? Not just Billy Graham, but who is it that goes to libraries or experiences like this library / I keep saying library, but it's more than that. Okay. What does the data say? Give a reason for it. All right. Now remember, especially when you're trying to expand an audience for something. Okay. This is sort of the adage in the not-for-profit world. Your best donor is the one who just gave you money, meaning they're the one. It's that person that's more likely to give you more money. So your best client, your best customer, is the one who just walked happily out of your facility. All right. So yeah, start taking a look at the demographics, insofar as you can get them from the Billy Graham library, and then start taking a look at what the data says about what sort of people go to places like this. how, if a particular demographic is maxed out, that is, you're likely not to get any more people from that demographic, how then do you reach other demographics that might be likely to go there? Okay. Who are they? What's the message? What sort of keywords, key phrases do they respond to? What does the data say? All right. And then also, and you'll read this in the instructions, so I'm not telling you anything you can't see for yourself. Make sure that you set up deliverables. That is, how is it that you'll know if you're reaching this demographic or not? I mean, besides they're showing up and buying more tickets. Okay, that would be good. Okay, and then yes, you continue to work in groups, continue to use your workflow platform. I think 2 groups are using Asana and 1 group is using Monday. All right, to assign tasks. I'm popping in and out periodically to all groups, and keeping an eye on the board for who's assigned to do what. I can't tell straight away if everybody is pulling equally at the cart. If you're a group leader and there's a problem with a group member, that they're just not responding, they're just not hitting the deliverables that they're assigned, reach out to me and then I'll get in and take a look. All right. Otherwise, keep working, doing what you're doing. Now, you turned in phase 1 this week. I will begin grading them probably tomorrow. All right. So you'll get some feedback from me. And I think if you're reticent about diving into phase 2 without getting some feedback from phase 1, I understand that. So I will try to get to them as soon as I can and, give you something that is useful. Okay. All right. Let's take a look at the questions from last week. By the way of what we're going to be looking at, what we're going to be focusing on this week, where we'll continue our look at data, and we're going to look at the types of data that come out of gathering and analyzing data. That is, we're going to look at the difference between descriptive statistics and inferential statistics. Okay. And then we're going to touch a little bit on secondary research. This for you will be, something you are likely familiar with. Okay. The difference between descriptive statistics and inferential statistics is very important for you to be able to identify. As a social scientist, which this is what you're training to be, right? This is perhaps one of the areas in which data is misrepresented or maybe simply not understood, all right? Because a descriptive statistic tells you something about the data set. An inferential statistic tells you something about the larger population, and the one cannot necessarily be applied to the other, but it is often done so. You'll see this particularly in politics. You'll see political polling in which it gives you a percentage of people and makes the inference that this is how everybody is thinking or everybody's going to act, when in fact, as a descriptive statistic, it is really only an inference about how those members of the group that were surveyed will behave. Does not speak to the population at large. So being able to understand what the difference is and identifying it, quickly, that is going to be a great value to you in your work, and some value to you when maybe a test rolls around. Wank from last week. See what you had to say. See what we can add. Question number, as discussed in Stacks, please briefly explain the difference between a dependent and an independent variable situation that illustrates the difference between the variables. Who went last? Let's take you first. A dependent variable is explained by is the measured variable that is collected and evaluated. An independent variable is one that is tested against the dependent variable. The difference in the variables in the things that is difference in the variables is the things that can vary. The independent variable are those things that are independent or separate from other variables that can be manipulated or changed, whereas everything else remains unchanged. The dependent variable, on the other hand, depends on the independent variable. It is the data that is collected to find the result or outcome. Simply put, the independent variable is the cause. The dependent variable is the effect. That is putting it succinctly. That is excellent. And think about it this way. You know, and sometimes you'll see these terms, they're dependent, independent variable expressed differently. Sometimes it will be the expressed variable and the explanatory variable instead of independent and dependent variable. Don't, you know, if you ever come across it, don't get hung up on that. 99.99999% of the time, if somebody knows what they're doing, the independent variable comes first. The dependent variable comes second in the equation, the hypothesis, or the discussion. And here's a quick, easy way to keep the two apart in your head. Okay, think about it like this: if somebody says, you know, I wonder, and you know, this could be any, let's say the weather. I wonder how cold it has to be to snow. And I wonder how cold it needs to be before it starts snowing. Your response would be, well, that depends. Okay. What depends on what? The snow would be the dependent variable. How cold it has to be before it snows is the independent variable. All right. So in other words, the independent variable is the thing that you're asking about and its effect on the outcome of the other thing that you're asking about, like temperature and its effect on the outcome of snow, because it depends. All right, so that's a you know, a little semantic trick to help keep those separate in your head, and you just need to, excuse me, you just need to know the difference between those two terms and to be able to explain it. All right. I mean, as a researcher and for, you know, future purposes. Question number 2, as discussed in Stacks, please briefly explain the following. Data have no meaning except the theory from which they came. Okay, notice a couple of things here first. Please note, data is plural. All right, so it's not a typographical error on the part of your sufficiently caffeinated instructor. That is, but the word refers to plurals, like mice and mice or something like. No, that's not, all right. That's not a good example. All right. Let's see. Annalisa, let's take you. You went first. Stacks states that data have no meaning except the theory from which they came, emphasizes the idea that data alone are nothing more than raw observations, measurements, numerical values. In the absence of a theoretical framework, these observations lack context and direction. Researchers must clearly define both the variables under investigation and the type of data being collected to ensure that the information gathered is meaningful. Theory guides the interpretation of data, shaping how the data are understood and applied. For example, identical survey responses may yield different conclusions depending on the theoretical perspective informing the study. Without a guiding theory, data remains fragmented and worthless. Okay, good answer. And the larger thing that I'd like you to take away from this question for this discussion, just like the piece that I had you read, and I structured question 4 around. Numbers on their own mean absolutely nothing. Okay. Numbers do not speak, you know, more truth than words. Numbers aren't, you know, absolutely correct, where words are subjective. I mean, this is stuff you hear all the time. Excuse me. I see people walking around with these t-shirts, you know, I believe in science. All right. Bad news for you, t-shirt wearer. That word science comes from the Latin term. I mean, it comes down to us as Westerners, from scientia, which just means knowledge. I believe in knowledge. Well, that's great. You know, I hope so. So numbers on their own they don't mean anything. They have to be contextualized. They have to be contextualized both in terms of how they're treated, and that's how do you process them. They have to be contextualized, and this is going to sound redundant, but that's the point. They have to be contextualized within the context of what it is that you're applying them to. So in the article that I gave you, for example, the numbers that were thrown around by the Defund the Police crew, and it wasn't just Black Lives Matter. There are other groups running around saying this. I lived in a town in which there were people showing up to my town hall, city council meetings, screaming this and pounding the podium. Defund the police. And now, what do you know? Surprise, surprise. On the ballot next is a 1% sales tax increase, as if I'm not taxed enough to do what? Hire more police because they all quit. So if you have a number and you say, well, this number clearly shows that the police run around bang, 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 bang and shooting innocent people, got to put it into context. How many people encounter the police? How many get shot? How many people that get shot are wielding a weapon? Of those that are not wielding a weapon and get shot, how many police officers are prosecuted for that shooting? Context. Data all by itself means very little, and in fact is the origin point of misinterpretation and misrepresentation. All right. So always when you see a number, I don't care, we're going to get to this very important point that I'll mention for you as social scientists. So social scientists, I don't care what the cause is that's being highlighted, identified, pushed, or pounded. Somebody starts throwing out numbers, it is your job as a Christian social scientist to say, what's the context? Okay, question number 3. As discussed in Scott, briefly explain a SWOT analysis. How and why would you conduct such an analysis? This is a term that's very, very common in business, even in communication. So if you're not familiar with it or you're not familiar how it goes, you really need to be Carolyn. Let's look at you. A SWOT analysis is a detailed examination of the company and or client from a number of viewpoints. It includes a chart that shows strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, hence the acronym SWOT, SWOT. And this is often drawn as a grid, like a box, and then it divided into 4. Strengths over here, weaknesses over here, opportunities over here, threats. So the strengths and threats are opposites of each other. The weaknesses and opportunities are opposites of each other, because in terms of the implementation of a campaign or the rollout of a product or a process, those factors, okay, strengths and threats, opportunities and weaknesses, they tend to exert a pull and cancel each other out. All right. So the strength of a product can be completely wiped out by threats. So you can have a great idea for a product, but let's say there are other companies who can produce it too much more cheaply than you can. That's a threat that could nullify the strength. So they go on, if you draw this grid like this box and then turn it into 4 boxes, they stand as opposites or diagonal opposites. Okay. Likewise, okay, weaknesses and opportunities. Although there is an opportunity in the market for whatever it is you're producing, if the weakness of the product, and this could be the process, you don't have the advertising budget, you don't have the manufacturing facilities, you're not going to be able to capitalize on the opportunity. So the weakness of the product nullifies the opportunity. All right. So if you ever see this drawn, in a square that's been divided into 4 squares, it's like SWOT. That's what's going on with it. All right, Carolyn, let's go back to you. I have done many of these for organizations, including a not-for-profit I work for. Identifying all these areas for a client or organization is helpful because it gives you a clear direction to focus PR efforts? What is going well? Keep doing. What is weak? Strengthened. What opportunities exist? Run towards. If there are any threats, prepare to mitigate them. Good. Threats could be unhinged leaders like Trump or a CEO. Trump as an unhinged leader, Carolyn, really? I don't know what she's talking about. I am the most hinged ever. Sorry, I'm not poking fun at anybody, but it's funny to see that in your answer, Carolyn. Who says heinous things publicly like this week when he created and published a racist and offensive depiction of the Obamas? I'm assuming you're referring to the video meme, and I don't know that he did that. I think he passed it on or someone, you know. In that instance, if the company actually cared, which Trump doesn't. Oh, now Carolyn, now your bias is showing, and we're going to get to that in question number 4. A PR professional would have to come in and try to clean up. Of course, in our president's case, he said he's not. He said he's not sorry, and it wasn't a mistake. So what can his team really do with that? Well, okay. So whether you love or hate the president, I think it's fair enough that I don't know, but if there's a communication director for that office, tough job. Very, very tough job. Okay, question number 4. After reading Dr. Gardner's article, How Not to Get Fooled by the Numbers, you know, and I should have dropped a comma or a semicolon. You know, it's sort of like it's time to eat, grandma. It's time to eat, grandma. You know, the sort of commas save lives. Sort of things. How not to get fooled by the numbers, because I wanted to play on words in the title. That is how not to get fooled by the numbers, and how, you know, sort of like how to build a house by the numbers, or how to get rich by the numbers. You know, 1, 2, 3. How not to get by the numbers. Please briefly explain the replication crisis. Select one of the 3 examples that Gardner cited and briefly explain how poorly tabulated or intentionally misrepresented statistics can have consequential outcomes in public behavior. Okay. Let's see. Tremaine, let's take you. According to Gardner's article, in reference to the explanation of what he describes as the replication crisis, he explains that this means in some areas of social sciences, including the political science, communication, sociology, psychology, somewhere between 30 and 70% of studies that pronounce conclusions about human behavior when repeated do not produce the same results. Okay. Yes. Excuse me. That is correct. Why is that a problem? Well, if this goes back to question number 1. You see, there's method in the madness here. It's the difference between descriptive statistics and inferential statistics, and especially where research is concerned. Nobody gives money to researchers to tabulate descriptive statistics unless the group that you're studying is the major data set. So, for instance, when they were looking at the rates of cancer in smokers, all right, here's an example. The statistics that they tabulated concerning the data set, that is the people who were smoking, were consistent enough that although the numbers of people who were smoking in the groups that they studied were fairly small, the consistency in the outcome, that is smoking leading to a rise in lung cancer, was consistent enough that the findings could be applied, inferential statistics, to the whole population. All right. But in most cases, okay, that's not the case. And researchers don't get money for descriptive statistics. Researchers get money for the outcome of inferential statistics. That is to say, what goes on in this data set is true for the whole population represented by the data set. But what if they're wrong? What if the results from their data set, if you did the same thing that they did with the same data set, and 30 to 70% of the time, you got a different number, statistically different enough that it didn't match what they got, then are those outcomes representative of the Whole population? No. This is at the heart of what's called the replication crisis, meaning you just can't replicate the studies. And, besides sociologists and communication academics and psychologists and stuff running around in little circles arguing about whose experiment is more replicable than others, I get that word right? You might say, who cares? Well, you care. You should care, because it is from this research, from psychologists, from sociologists, from communication scholars, that organizations will draw conclusions for public policy and then pass them up the chain to lawmakers who are looking for something they can point to as true. And numbers, as we know, are often believed to be truer than words. Like, oh, look at the statistics. Look at the number. This is how it is. Somebody's got to make a law. And then we get stuck with, the expression is, we get stuck with solutions in search of a problem, because they're things being done okay, but they're not things being done that will do something for the problem that we needed to get done, to get fixed. Okay, and that's a big problem. Okay, back to you. Where'd I go? Okay, here we go. Okay, not produce. One of the examples that he uses in the reference is the now overturned Roe v. Wade. Excuse me, you were great, Tremaine. My reading that Roe v. Wade decision. In light of Dr. Bernard Nathanson's impact on the push for the law, after watching the ultrasound process personally, he had a change of heart. But this was only after he had performed some 70,000 abortions and grossly exaggerated or simply falsified statistical data. Even after Dr. Nathanson admitted to the false data, his data had already caused a blind spot in the public eye and refused to see beyond it. In other words, the danger of this, of not questioning whether the numbers that are represented from, given whether it's a formal study or statistical analysis, whether these numbers not represented don't represent something that is accurate. Okay, if you just don't question that, which by and large the public doesn't, because they look at numbers as like hocus pocus. They must have, some tremendous power because they're numbers, because they're science. No, they don't. Numbers are as abstract by way of symbols as our words. And it is highly contextual, highly dependent upon how they're being used. And so, in that article, I realized that I probably poked at some sensitive political areas for some people. And I did that on purpose. Okay, not because the purpose was not to poke you, but the purpose was rather to show you it is our duty. It's just us. We are becoming the experts in a field of social science, and it is our duty to learn how to do good, proper work. When you're working as a researcher, and I don't care, you may go or you may not go on into PR, okay? But when you're working as a researcher in whatever capacity, remember this: be an investigator, not an advocator. Now, yes, of course, we are here, and I take this very seriously, at Regent University as Christians, to train ourselves well and go out and transform the world. I take that seriously in my own work. All right. So we have those things that we advocate for. All right. Here's the thing. You'll be a much more effective advocator for whatever it is that you're advocating for if you are first a good investigator. If you use solid methodology to get to the right answers to the questions of what should we do about X, Y, and Z. And if you get to the wrong answers, maybe they're politically expedient. Maybe they bring in more money, but they're not going to help solve problems X, Y, and Z. If that's something that happens, then we are failing as communication specialists, as sociologists, as Christian scholars. Integrity, first and foremost. Be an investigator, not an advocator. So I use these three areas, abortion and Black Lives Matter and COVID, because they are three areas in which either misrepresentation or falsification of data has had tremendous social consequences. Okay, so it's bad enough when numbers get misused. What's worse is when they get misused and social agendas get turned loose on the public that just aren't backed by the data. Okay, and Tremaine, you mentioned, my citation of Dr. Bernard Nathanson, who admits, hey man, we made these things up. Everybody knew it. That statistic and his admission, and he goes into it in greater detail, is taken from his book called The Hand of God, a work that I highly recommend to you. And it talks about, how it is that the whole abortion, nonsense just barely scratches the surface. Got into the headspace of first the medical professionals and then the public at large. Okay. Now it wasn't just data manipulation. There were other forces at work, but it was through data manipulation that they were able to push this up and over the top. First legalizing it in New York and then other states. And then of course came the challenge from Texas. That's where the case that went to the Supreme Court, Roe versus Wade, originated from. And the person who was Roe, I got to know her. I've worked in the pro-life field. I prefer anti-abortion because pro-life to me just seems like you beg the obvious. I mean, everybody, and we're alive. We should be for everybody's life. It doesn't matter how big you are. I got to know the person that was Roe in Roe v. Wade, not really well, but I got to know her. Her name was Norma McCorvey. She has a powerful book that you should look at. I think I've given my copy to somebody. Anyway, it's called One, W-O-N, Won by Love. But did you know, okay, contrary to the claims of the lawyer from Texas that brought Roe v. Wade to the Supreme Court, she was a person by the name of Sarah Weddington. I never met her, but I did meet the legislators who argued against her on the floor of the Texas House when she was pushing abortion in Texas. But did you know, if you read the complaint of Roe v. Wade, Sarah Weddington, the lead attorney, claimed in this complaint that the unknown defendant, Roe, okay, who was really Norma McCorvey, had gotten pregnant, sought an abortion, tried to get an abortion in the state of Texas, was denied an abortion, and then had to travel out of the country to Mexico to get an illegal abortion in which she suffered terrible health problems. That was the claim in Roe v. Wade. But did you know, and if you read her book, Won by Love, Norma McCorvey never tried to get an abortion. Okay. She thought about it. She, had a very, very rough life. She was addicted to alcohol and other drugs. She was frequently sexually abused. She became pregnant, and she thought about it, but she actually had her baby. She never sought an abortion. She was never denied an abortion. She never had an illegal abortion. She had her baby and gave it up for adoption. And after her conversion to Christ, and that's the, core of her book, Won by Love. She petitioned the Supreme Court. Said, look, the facts of the case that represented me, although my name was hidden, I was called Roe, are false. I didn't seek an abortion and was denied. I wasn't forced to seek out an illegal abortion in another country. It's all untrue. And you know what happened? Nothing. The Supreme Court at the time, when she brought her case, refused to hear it. Didn't want to hear it. Yeah, Roe was decided. We've got to have it. That Bernard Nathanson, who made this public, that we made up the numbers. Norma McCorvey said I was lied about by this attorney, Sarah Weddington. I never sought an abortion. I wasn't denied an abortion. I had the baby, gave it up. No. Don't want to hear it. So this is what can happen when facts are misrepresented by way of number. And what I want from you, okay, and look, we have our different opinions and our orientations politically. That's fine. I didn't use the entities in that article to make the point because of my political views. Here's what I want you to do. Be honest and honorable investigators when you're working as a researcher, not advocators. Lead with good methodology and knowledge, not with opinion and presumption and bias. Leave that aside. And not only is that the honorable thing to do as a Christian researcher, it's going to make you a better advocate when you get to the other side of the evaluation process. Because if you're going to advocate for something that's good and righteous, the best thing that you can do is to come up with the answers that are the right answers to the problems that need to be solved. All kinds of problems in society. All kinds. The shortest distance between where we are now and where we need to be is good, well-founded, honest answers, not agendas and opinions. Understand? That's what I'm asking from you. That's what we should be striving for as Christian communication professionals. And that's why I put the examples that I did in the article, not to push anybody's political buttons. Okay? All right, everybody. I love you. Love the work that you're doing. Keep up the good work. I will start on your campaign, phase 1 coming here shortly. So you'll start getting some feedback from me. Make sure that I said I would be grading discussions 1 through 4. I've been working on discussions from other classes, so I haven't got that yet. So be sure that you've got everything 1 through 4, because as soon as I grade it, it's closed. All right. And remember that I think about you often. I pray about you often, and I will see you on Canvas. All right, everybody. Bye-bye.